First, want to say welcome everybody and thank you for joining this webinar. It's a great pleasure for us today to present a workshop on how to classify and extract information from financial business documents using SAP AI Business Services. So that's a unit in the AI unit both of us work in. We will be presenting today two services. That's document information extraction and document classification, as the title already also suggests. I will be doing the first part, the first approximately hour of the workshop that will be concerned with document classification and a short introduction. And Serda, my colleague here, will be doing the second hour. Of course, he will leave some room for Q&A, so we won't hopefully not need the 2 full hours for our workshop, right? And of course, this is a workshop. The idea is that we want this to be as much possible for you to participate, right? So we have prepared everything that you could do everything yourself. And that would also, of course, be the goal. In terms of Zoom, I want to make 3 short statements just so that you are aware, right? So while I will be talking, Serda will be looking at the chat and at the Q&A to see whether there's any questions or concerns coming up, right? So feel free to post there. You can control in the chat, that's an important note, when you send it only to the panelists. You can choose from a little box, or to panelists and attendees, right? That's for you to choose. Q&A, if you ask a question in the Q&A tool, everybody will see it. There's also the additional option to raise your hand. Then we can unmute you, because usually in this webinar, Zoom kind of settings, you can't just unmute yourself. Yeah, I think that's it from the organizational perspective. So if you have questions, just use the indicated channels, right? So chat, Q&A, or raise your hand. And as I'm not seeing any questions or raised hands so far, I'm assuming I've made these basic points clear enough. So I will start with giving you a short introduction to the two services. Okay. So to click my PowerPoint so that we can start. This is a legal disclaimer from SAP. Oh, one more disclaimer is actually also good. We are recording this meeting, right? So if you raise your hand, say something, or ask a question, right, it will be recorded and will be made available, right? So that's something that you should keep in mind. But of course, that shouldn't keep you from doing it. It's not like there's not ample recordings of everyone out there by now in this pandemic. Okay, let me briefly introduce the agenda, right? The agenda of this workshop will be, as I said, that we will present 2 business document processing services. One is called document classification, one is called document information extraction. Document here means in the sense that we process documents in terms of different file types that you can send to us. Which file types depends a bit on the service, but in general, we of course expand this support, and currently we are mostly supporting PDF and not all, but some different extension of images, right? So that's what document means. Classification basically means we try to sort documents, but I will explain that in more detail very shortly. And information extraction means we are trying to extract certain values out of the document, for example, to use that in an ERP system or whatever other system you might find interesting, where you need structured data in terms of instead of the unstructured data that is an image, right? So I will introduce these two. This is the presentation I'm holding right now. This will not take more than 10 minutes so that you're not bored by the presentation. Then we will get an SAP Business Technology Platform trial account in case you don't have one yet. Then we will use the document classification service on some sample data that we provide and analyze the results. So this will be the first hands-on exercise. And the second hands-on exercise that will then be performed by Serda is use document information extraction and its UI to extract information from these documents. And in the end, we will hopefully have enough time for questions and feedback. In general, this workshop is intended, right, when we start the hands-on session, just so that you're aware of that. Here, if you miss a part like this one, right, this is a prerequisite for the other one. So ideally you would be there. That will be in about 10 minutes. Apart from that, you can, of course, also follow along. So we will also show it in parallel. That would more be like a demo. But the intention of this is really that you try to follow along. So that you can also do this continue this experience and try to see whether it can help you in some way. Okay, brief introduction, as we said, to the general topic. So our unit is called SAP AI Business Services, and we are part of a focus area that is called business document processing. So this, of course, means we focus on business documents. You have some statistics given here about the volume of business documents. For example, there's quite a lot of business documents of all sorts sending around. Some of them could qualify as what you call financial documents, right? So that's why it's in the title. And of course, and that's the important part here, quite some documents that are sent around, for example, also invoices or sales orders or payment advices, do not yet have a digital form, let's say, right? So they're not sent around in structured data. Some have the structured data by now embedded in bar or QR codes, right? So some form of codes that can, of course, help you quite a bit. Then you don't basically need our service, or our service can also do that for you. But we have an easier job. We don't need to basically understand the image itself to get out the text, right? But we can use this barcode to get the structured data directly. So this is also the basic functionality of this business document processing area is document classification for classifying documents, meaning you basically have a document and you want to understand, for example, is certain elements are in here. Does it have a service level agreement? If you want to think about a contract, or you want to know, is this an invoice? Or you want to know, is this a purchase order? These are all kinds of questions you could ask a document classification service. Document information extraction service, on the other hand, is something where you are more asking yourself, in this document, for example, can I get the invoice number? This is not a classification task, because classification would mean that you have a finite set of answers. So you would basically say, if you say, for example, which document type it is, you can imagine you train it for 10 or 20 classes, and you can do that. But for example, an invoice number is something that can take all possible forms. So that's what you would then rather call information extraction from the document. And what's also offered, and that's mostly for the document information extraction service, is master data matching. So you can upload master data to our service, and this will match it to you with extracted results to basically give you more information, enrich your results. Yeah, and of course, what we aim for is to create instant value. So that's also what we try to show today, that even after these 2 hours of workshop, you should be able to get some results out of this. So you should, for example, after this workshop, be able to send a business document to our services and get returned whether it's a invoice, purchase order, or payment advice. And you should be able to send a document of this type to our service, to the other service, and the document information extraction service, and get back something like an invoice number or like a sender address or something like that. Okay. Like I said, this business document processing portfolio is basically the 2 services I already described in a bit more detail, and a third service that's called business entity recognition. This is not going to be part of this webinar, but there was I think either also a webinar or a guided demo about this service as part of this webinar series that you are attending. So in case you didn't see that, it will be recorded and will be made available. Good, now let me briefly give you the very basic use case of these 2 services. I already started a bit on that, so it should be fairly quick. We have some customer service employee, let's call him Bob, right? And he gets a lot of documents every day. Here it looks, of course, like he gets them physically. As you all know, usually it's a lot of times digital by now. And if it's not digital, they're usually centers that digitalize them for you and then send them to your PC where you can act on them in some way. And Bob usually is concerned with sorting these documents into different categories to forward them to the right compartment. Right? So for example, there's a complaint, there's a dunning letter, there's an invoice, there might be a payment advice, and so on. What Bob has to do for that is he has to open every file and read it to decide what it is and then forward it. This, of course, means Bob spends a lot of time on classifying documents according to certain schemata. What the business document classification service aims to is to automate this. So instead of Bob having to open each file, Sorry about that. Instead of Bob having to open each file, we would use machine learning to make this decision automatically, right? This, of course, is something where you would need to know which kind of types of documents you want to classify. That's a limit of that. But in general, what it would do the same thing for you. And what we have, for example, established in one of the pilots where we have rolled out the service to a customer is we have also allowed them for problems or for documents that are where the model has low confidence, basically, to still have Bob annotate them. That just means that he has to do less, right? For the documents where it's clear what kind of type it is, he doesn't have to annotate them. Okay, and now Bob is free to do more value creating tasks, which of course Bob is happy about, right? And that's the idea of this document classification service. For the document information extraction service, as we said, it's a similar approach. Let's say, for example, now we have the next department. We have an accounts payable clerk. He's called John. And what he basically does is he looks at documents to understand, for example, what's on an invoice. So, for example, what is the position that we actually bought in this invoice? Because he wants to use this information to put it into the ERP system or match it against some other table or something like this. This is what we call line items in the document information extraction service, these positions. And these are what we call header fields. So different, really sorry. Yeah. So extracting these kind of header fields and line items from a document is the main purpose of document information extraction. And they're, of course, the same thing. Instead of John having to type it all off, he can use this kind of automated service to speed up his work and focus on more value creating tasks. With that, we are already at the end of the introduction. So I'm briefly gonna switch to another, not what we want, briefly gonna switch to another window. I will share this link. This is the link for the workshop content. Just need to briefly find the chat. Okay. I've now sent a link in the chat, and you should all be able to click it. This should take you to this GitHub site. It's on the public GitHub. It's not an internal GitHub, of course, and the SAP organization, and then it's called Business Document Processing, the repository. This is where we have our client library and some enabling material and so on. Yeah, so you can all click it already. I will tell you soon how to use it, but maybe I first want to ask if there are any questions or comments on the initial part of presenting the scope of the services.
There was one request to provide the slides that you just did, the presentation that you just presented. The question was whether they can download it from somewhere.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah. So we can either share exactly these slides. That's definitely an option. It's also all taken from the official decks, so you can also find them on the product pages, I think. But yeah, I will check it out. I will check out how we can make them accessible to you. Okay. With that, let's go into the first hands-on part. So the first hands-on part, as we said, will be about the document classification service. So what we are going to do is we are going to walk through this demo usage part here of this links that I just shared. So what I would ask you all is to basically open this first link. It is one of the two prerequisites. So you see here two prerequisites. So the first step, as I told you in the introduction, would be to get a trial account. This is completely free. You need to sign up to SAP. You need an email address, as usually on the internet these days. But that's about all you need to do. If If you already have a D number or an SAP.com account in general, you don't need to do this. You can skip these steps. Right, it's also as it here in the tutorial. So I'm going to skip steps 1 to 4 because I already have done that. What I will start with step 4, log on to SAP BDP trial. So you basically just open this link once you have created an account. And then you get to this landing page. Here you click enter trial account. You might get a pop-up that asks you to create a trial account, and ideally you would choose to create it in EU10 data center. It would be important for this workshop. You create the trial account, and then you should see something like this. This is what is called the SAP Business Technology Platform Cockpit. This is basically where you can provision your service instances, deploy applications, and of course also make it accessible to your business users, customers, or whatever you might want to do. And with that, we are basically already at the end of this first step, right? So here you see there's a verify account, then you're already at this welcome screen, right? So what I would ask you to do, right? So here, as I said, you would ideally choose Europe, Frankfurt, AWS. Yeah, and apart from that, there's not a lot more to this tutorial. So it should be a very quick tutorial. Maybe if you are done, you could indicate in the chat that you are done so that you have a trial account. Basically, you see this page. I will give you like 1 or 2 minutes to catch up, and ideally you would indicate in the chat when you are done with this part. First person indicated done. Very good. Thank you. Let's maybe wait a few more seconds or minutes until more people have indicated that they are finished with this first step. Of course, if you have any specific blockers or issues with creating this trial account, also let us know, please, in the chat, right? So that we can try to remove these obstacles. Or raise your hand, of course, as we said, that's the other option to interact with us during this workshop. If you have any concerns, comments, questions, or blockers in your way, we are happy to resolve them. Okay, I think I would move on. Not all of you have indicated that they're done, but I hope that most of you just forgot to indicate the done, the ones that didn't do it. So let's continue. As we have another prerequisite that we need to cover, I will briefly show that, and we will have another pause after that so that we can then start with the main workshop content. So now we have a Business Technology Platform trial account. Next step is to create a DC service instance. There we have a second link under the link I shared in the chat, so you can reopen it in case you navigated away from this tab, right? And you just reopen the link, and then you will have this short demo on how to create a service instance with a trial account. It's given here with 15 minutes, but that's probably already saying too much. So what you basically have to do, as we said, you go to your trial account, you go to a space. So in the trial account, you have the concept, first of all, of a global account. That is your global account. This is now our space. In the space, we have different tabs that we can choose from. The only one that's important for us here is either service marketplace or instances and subscriptions. So the services tab. And what we can see in the service marketplace is we can then search for document, which should show you different kinds of documents, document-related, services. So these are all services available on the business technology platform. You can also, of course, remove this again to see all of them, right? And what we will be concerned with today is document classification and document information extraction trial. Right, but there's also other one. Here you see document translation. Here you see some for document management. And this is just that contains a keyword document. So what we would do now to create a service instance, we would basically click here, click create. Right, that would open a pop-up where we would just need to decide on what is the plan. We can just leave that everything at default. Only thing we need to do is we need to give it a name. So will just call mine webinar. You can also give it some more expressive name if you already know what you want to do with it, of course. You don't need to specify anything in Windows 2 or 3. You can just click create. And this will start creating a service instance for you. What does that mean? That's basically the possibility. So what this service instance creation happens in the background, like kind of your account, let's say, talks to a service broker that will then basically give you the necessary credentials to use this service. This we will see in instances and subscriptions tab. So if you go there, you should now see a couple of instances. Actually, you see that I already have here one lingering around from Tech App. So I should probably clean up at some point, right? This is the one I created just now, webinar. And what you would do here is you would create a service key. So click create on the right side. When you have clicked on the instance, again, need to give it a name, right? You can just call it anything you want. Of course, this is not important for the further workshop. Oh, do I still have my, oh yeah, I have my wrong keyboard. So we give it a name and we create the service key. So now this finishes already the second prerequisite. As you see, it's not really 15 minutes. What's now important is that whatever you see here as a service key, you copy that. You just press Control A and Control Copy. Or if you're on Mac, of course, Command A and Command Copy. Yeah, and this will basically mean you have the service key in your clipboard, and then we will use that soon to communicate with the service from a different platform. So this is what you would do if you want to use some other platform to consume the service. You can also deploy an application. That's another road to do it. That's a little bit too involved here for this short workshop. Would eat too much time. So we would start directly now with basically the hands-on exercise. So I would once again ask you all to indicate if you manage to create such a service key. So the service instance and the service key I just showed you. You also have the demo or the tutorial here that is very detailed with a lot of pictures and so on. So try it out whether it works for you, and please indicate in the chat once you're done. And after you are done with that, you can open this one because this will take 1 or 2 minutes to spin up the Docker container that we will be using to understand and communicate with the service instance that we just created. I will again pause here for 1 or 2 minutes to give you all a chance to finish. Please indicate when you are done so that I know that I'm not boring you at some point, right? Perfect. So first people are responding that they have created the key successfully. As always, also let us know in case you don't succeed, right? That's also important. Okay, I'll give you another 30 seconds maybe. briefly drink some coffee. Okay. As nobody is complaining, also not everybody indicated they're done, but I guess enough people indicated that they're done. So I will continue. If that annoys you, let me know, then I will stop immediately. Okay, looks good. So what we will now do is basically we will use this notebook that you opened with a click on this upper link, right? So the lower link is one that requires an enterprise account so that you can't use a certain functionality that is disabled in this trial account that we are now using, but not important for the purpose of this workshop. So what we can do, right, in this notebook, we will learn how to use the document classification. So remember the first service I introduced today. As I said, I'll be covering this hands-on part. And in this usage example, what we will do is we will use a pre-trained model. So we won't train a model because that's not part of the trial account quota to train a model. Training a model is something that you can then do when you have an enterprise license. This model was trained to classify documents to the classes invoice, purchase order, and payment advice. So this is simply, simply some document types that we encounter. It's also the document types that are used in the document information extraction service. So you will have some more understanding of that after the second part of the workshop. And what we will use as the data that we provide, as we stated, is we will use a set of fake invoices, purchase order, and payment advices, which we generated for this workshop. So we try to make it realistic, of course, but it's created data. So it's because, of course, we value privacy of our customers, and we don't just share any customer data. What we want to do in this demo is we want to do inference on this pre-trained model. We want to understand how we can calculate performance metrics of the whole model, either on a single document, see how it performs, or on a set of documents, see what are important metrics in document classification. And optional, we will use the confidence values returned by the service to sort out one category that we have in the set that the model was not trained on. Okay. With that said, these initial steps you don't need to do anymore. That's what we just did. This is just to have it self-contained in this notebook. We also mention it here. So what we will now do is we will basically just scroll down. This is what's called a Jupyter notebook. What we will do basically is we will enter the service key, meaning we will mark everything, including the curly braces here, and just press Control V. And if you still have your service key there, then that should work. Of course, the service key is something that you should be keeping secret, right? So this is what I'm doing here, sharing my screen while I show that it's not ideal. But as I will only be using it for this workshop, and it's a trial account which can't create too much load, let's say, on the system, it's not that big of a problem. And of course, I will just be deleting this instance after the workshop, right? So these are the things that you should be aware of, right? In this first step that we are going to do, we will show you how you install and consume the client library. The client library is a client library that we offer currently only in Python, but we are trying to extend the language scope there. And what we can do with that is we can basically click in one of these fields. We press Shift Enter. That's a command to basically execute the cell. You see this by a 1 appearing here. That means this cell was executed. So basically these variables are now available to us in this programming environment, and we will now go through it step by step. So we'll simply go to the second class and press Shift Enter again, and I will explain what we do. And of course, you can change anything in any way, right? Of course, be aware that if you change something, you can also break things, right? So here it's just basically giving the information how to consume the service instance, extracting 4 specific things from there that we need. And then we import the client library. So it's the client library. And then we instantiate one instance of this client library. Okay. And now first thing where you can play around a bit is basically learn about the different methods offered by the client library. So what you can do is we can simply create a new cell. So you see these are the ones I've executed here. These are not executed yet. And we could, for example, write here my DC client. That's now the client library object that you have in your programming environment. You can press dot and tab, and this will give you per tab completion properties and methods of this object. Right. So what we see here is, for example, the base URL. That's something that we actually put in. But we also see methods like how to classify documents, how we train a model. This is also in here. This, for example, won't work if we call that. We can try that because of the trial accounts thing that I mentioned earlier. So you can also, maybe the first step, let me show you how you find out about the parameters, because it's of course not initially clear. You can use the question mark on any method that will open this little pop-up down here. Basically show you what it expects, right? With the description of the parameters that you need to put in. But for this method, for example, even if we put in here any parameters that might not make sense, then we will even there get, you'll get an error code that's 294 and feature not available in trial mode. So if you get that, then I'm sorry about that. Some methods will be disabled, but most methods should work, especially the ones that are for inference. So those are the ones that we are going to also see in the course of this notebook for the most part. Okay, so this exercise here basically just shows you how you can use, like we said, this IPython notebook magic to see the doc strings of all of these methods to understand what the client library can do. This is an example where you can see basically now this is the first time where actually we are communicating with the service instance, right? So far everything was local to this programming environment that we have here, which is just a Python kernel displayed via this website. And here in this, what you actually see, we do the classify document. We have two parameters. We have one PDF, that's just a relative path in this repository, one of these generated fake business documents that I talked about that we provide for the workshop. And we have a model name and a model version that we use. And it will return some values. You can, again, as we said, you can program here at whatever you want. So for example, let's say, oh, I don't understand this. This is too not nice displayed. Then you could import some other libraries to print it nicer, right? So you would write something like this. Or of course, also add your project or use case specific processing, or maybe add some, look at some other aspects of the response or things like that. Okay, so this is basically now what it shows is we have sent this document to the service and what the document returns. And that now depends, of course, on which model we choose and which model version we choose. We will basically get back, okay, we get a document ID. This is just like the unique ID that we use to identify the document in the service. And we get back, most importantly, the predictions, where it says we predict one characteristic here that we call document type. That's the SAP document type model, right? And then we say, this service gives certain attributes to this document where it says gives a certain confidence for it being an invoice, payment advice, or purchase order. This here is formulated as what is called a multi-class problem, meaning the classes are mutually exclusive. It can only be one of them. That's something that you can choose while training a model in the document classification service. And this means they will sum to 1, these probabilities. Otherwise, they won't. If you formulate it as what's called a multi-label problem. Okay, with that said, you can also, this for example now hitting a certain other get endpoints that will just list all the documents that you have processed. So you can also send it again, see that it happens more. You can send another one by looking into this folder here, right? So that's all something. So I would ask you briefly to take 1 or 2 minutes to understand and explore that. And if you have any questions or comments, let us know. Or if you are done with this and are happy with what you saw, then indicates that as well. Or if you're not happy with what you saw, of course, also indicates that. Otherwise, I would give you maybe a minute and then I would continue with the second part, which is then running inference on a pre-trained model and looking at the results for a specific document. So we have a first question in the chat, and as I'm not talking right now anyway, I will answer this question immediately. So somebody asked, do we need to create a model and train it and use it? So that's in general, I think, a very good question. It's also something that depends a bit on the service, exact service we're using from AI Business Services. So in most services, we have some what we call pre-trained model, right? And as we said initially, this workshop today will be about using one of these pre-trained model. So what we will do here is we will use one model that was already trained, right? But of course, and that's also what we see in most projects or use cases is, once you start working with a customer or with an internal stakeholder to some, in some more depths, usually they have their, let's say, own definitions, for example. Oh, somebody lost the GitHub link, yeah. We'll continue with my answer shortly. Okay. Yeah, shared it again. So somebody lost the GitHub link because he was disconnected. So shared it again so that he can catch up. Where was I? Oh yeah, I was answering the question about the pre-trained model. So sorry about for being for interrupting myself basically. So yeah, so there is pre-trained models. Those you obviously don't need to train because they're pre-trained. Mostly when you start talking to customers, internal stakeholders, they have specific taxonomy. So most people don't just want to consume pre-trained model, but want to train their own models sooner or later in a use case. So this is something that this DC service is able to offer as a functionality. That's what this train model endpoint is for. There's very convenient and easy to use endpoints, in my opinion, to, for example, upload a whole folder of documents to the training set, and then you trigger a training on it. This all happens on the SAP machine learning platform in the end. And then you can basically choose a name and a version number, or you choose a name. The version number is usually given automatically. And then you can also consume that in the same way that we will consume a pre-trained model. So that's in general the idea. That would then be like a custom or customer-specific model that you have trained yourself. Right, and this of course also would only be accessible to you. The pre-trained model is things that we train on SAP data and that we can then share with customers. So there's one more question, which I'll also briefly answer to give the person a chance to catch up. So there's one of the attendees is asking whether we need to develop these models in Python. The answer is of course no, right? You don't need to train these models in Python. What we do offer is we offer the most convenient client library in Python. So as I mentioned initially, the client library currently that we offer, or the client libraries for all services, are, as far as I'm aware, only Python-based client libraries. So that's when you would have to use Python to use a Python client library, obviously. You can use the REST API in the end. I can also briefly show you that. It's actually what's basically in this base URL. So if you go, for example, to some URLs, and you will see the Swagger API, right, of our service. So of course, as a developer persona, in some sense, you will probably have seen something like this before. And this API, of course, allows you to consume this endpoints from with any language you want, right? It's a bit more programming effort than what we show here because you don't get these convenient methods and you need to do a bit more, but it's not much code. So this client library in all is maybe a few hundred lines of code, right? So it should be doable. Hope I answered your questions. If not, of course, also for the first one, feel free to create or mention follow-up questions. It's very good that we are a little bit interactive. Otherwise, I will now continue with point 2. So with point 2, I will briefly, first of all, run these 4 cells, because what you might see after running these 4 cells, and I will explain why, these 4 cells will take a bit. You see it with the star, meaning it's executing. And why? Because what we did here is we used some normal Python functionality to just get all files that are in a certain folder. So in the folder data classification data, any subfolder, and end with PDF. This is in the documents that we find. So it's a total of 40. That's the 40 documents that we, as we said, generated for this workshop. Oh, so, yeah, I will also answer the question soon. So we have here 40 documents, right? We briefly look at the doc string for these documents, and then we execute on all these 40 documents thing. What this means in terms of the REST API, I can maybe show. Then I can also show you how to open the REST API. So if you have this REST API here, right? Then what will basically happen here in this case is you have the classification endpoint. So what will happen in the background of this endpoint, also for the first one, sorry, this is the wrong. This one I had open earlier. Yeah, so here you see it's still running, right? So it runs for a while. Why? For each of the 40 documents, it right now in the background, it sends first the documents to this endpoint, so to the post endpoint, create a job for document classification. And afterwards, it polls the get endpoint to get the result for the specific document. Right, and this is done with a certain number of what we call polling threads. So of course, you can always scale it up, use more polling threads. Threads will create more load on the system. That's what you can control during initialization of the client library, so during instance creation, right? As one attendee is asking how to open the REST API, I also want to briefly show that, because it's actually part of the service key. So what I showed here is actually a productive, or the productive, like one of the factory data centers, but there's lots of different data centers where this is offered. So easiest to see the exact Swagger API of the data center you are in. It also means the credentials for your service instance will work there, right? We will basically copy this URL from the service key. We will add that here. This alone will not be enough. And this is because we also have something. Yeah, so the Swagger, right? So we have a second key here that's important. So you basically take the URL from the service key plus the Swagger from the service key, and that will then allow you to see the Swagger API for your specific data center or for your service instance, the respective Swagger APIs. They're very similar, of course, right? For the different data centers are usually the same depending on the deployed versions and so on. But then if you want to use this via Authorize, you can also add here the bearer token in the end. I can show you, actually Serda will show you in the second tutorial how to get a bearer token. You can also look at that in the client library. You can get your bearer token quite easily. Let me briefly see where I am. So this has finished by now, yes. But let me briefly try to find out whether I can find the bearer token. I think it's it's also stored in this client library, the token. It was in here maybe. Client ID, deploy model. Let me briefly try to find out. It shouldn't be that difficult. So this is also, of course, the source code of this client library, of course, is open source, right? That's the link I shared initially, right? So the repo you're working in is the repo where this client library is contained in. And there we will try to see how this is handled. So it's done in the common client. Okay, so it's in a called common auth, and this is session.auth. Okay, so I was on the right track. Right, so now you would have the access token to basically use with this Swagger URI that we just constructed. Then you could press Authorize, paste the bearer token there, and then use the Swagger API from here. That's also possible. Right? That's basically the classical way of using a Swagger API. We are providing this client library to make it more convenient and more easy to understand the concepts, right? Because we want to explain them here in about 1 hour for one product. We don't have too much time to, basically, for example, it's pretty boring to poll documents in an asynchronous fashion via this Swagger API and so on. So that's why we provide also additionally this client library. But of course, if you're coming from another language and want to use a service, then you would need to consume this REST API. So you would most likely write something similar to the client library in your respective language or use something you have already. Okay, with that much said, what we are going to continue is with the next section. So what we would now do, now we have actually, as you remember, we waited here for this when the last question arrived. And what we see here basically is we see a method called classify documents, so multiples. We pass a list of file names and we again say which model we want to use. This will classify all the documents. So we will have the results in some form of list here in this results. And then what we can do is we can basically look at the different document results. So here you can choose any number from 0 to 39. Right, so just enter one, then execute all the cells here until you get to number 3. And what that will do for you is basically it will show you the document itself that you are sending to the service. So this is just by using an iframe here of embedding the PDF into the notebook. Then it will also show you the results. So you see, for example, for the results, that it thinks this one is a payment advice. So let's check. Yeah, I mean, payment details, pretty obvious, probably not that difficult. So there's also more difficult examples, as we will also see in the metric evaluation in the middle. We also see, and that's what is visualized here, is basically what exactly does it predict. So it says the correct solution is payment advice. This is just possible here because we say we have what we call ground truths, or also needed for training. So basically, we have sorted them in certain folders, so we know which type of document it is. Yeah, and it also says here in this case that with 70% probability thinks that's a payment advice. So what you would do, for example, if you want to use this result, you could use an argmax on these values and then decide which kind of document it is. Of course, it's just a single document. You will also find some wrong example depending on the number you choose. You can try 1, 2, 3 numbers if you want to. Otherwise, I would continue with number 3 soon, as we only have 10 minutes left in my part. Yeah, if you have additional questions now's a good time to ask again. Otherwise, I will continue with showing you basically how to evaluate a model on a given set of documents to see whether, or to understand how well it performs. That would be the next part here, number 3. Another attendee is asking the question, do we need to authorize REST API always? So yes, there's different ways to authorize against this REST API, right? One option, that's the one I just described, is you just go in here. So this is the one that we just opened. You go to Authorize, and here you just type the token from this thing, from the client library. Of course, usually you wouldn't use the client library to get the access token, right? So let me explain a bit more. So what actually does the client library does in the back that you can also do manually. I can also show you how to do that. Or as said, I will actually show you in the next session. So maybe let's just do it there for in the interest of time, right? But yes, you always need to authorize to use the service, right? Of course, you wouldn't always generate an access token manually, right? This is something, of course, that you would automate. In the best case, if you use an application in the business technology platform yourself, then you could just do what's called a service binding instead of creating a service key. And then basically your application would have it in an environment variable, and you would just need to forward it, basically the right environment variable to first to an XSUIA instance. There you would get the token, and then with that token, you can consume our service. So that's the general flow for authentication of our service that's implemented, and you can also look at it. We basically looked at it right now here. So this is a small class here for this client library that handles the authorization so that you don't need to worry about it. You only need to give it the client ID and the client secret, basically like user and password if you want to compare to that or something. It will generate kind of session tokens for you. There's a Python code for printing token.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to scan it occasionally. So the for getting the token would be this one here. So basically the client object that you have, then.session access token. I can also paste it to the chat just so that in case somebody wants to use it later, you can use it. But this is already pretty detailed questions that we get here, so that's good, that at least you already are involved with the service to some degree and trying it out. Okay, so let me continue with point 3 so that I don't overrun my time and Serdar has enough time to cover his part, and especially we have enough time in the end to answer any open question in case there are some. So what I will now briefly show is basically performance metric of a classification model. Here, importantly, as we say, we have the ground truth provided. So we have labels for all documents. We know what we, so that means we know for each document what's the correct solution. And we know for each document, as we have all sent them to the service earlier with this classify documents call, as you said, right? Send them and get a result back for each one. We can now evaluate basically how many of them we got correct. Right, that would be the first step. That's what's usually called accuracy. That's the first kind of metric, right? We can also do other things. So for example, the first thing that is done here in this notebook is in the cell 2. That's just a very, once again, a very simple visualization. Also not very interesting for this data set, but can be very interesting for other data sets. So for example, for the ones you might want to use, right, on this for this service, you have here 4 categories or classes: invoice, purchase order, payment advice, other, 10 documents each. So that's a set of fake documents we provide. And what it says up here, that's actually a title I just added here. It says this data set seems to be well balanced, 10 documents from each class. And that's already why you would plot this. So always something that's important for a classification task is to know what's called the class frequency. Right. So right now we could say for each of those classes, we have a class frequency of 25%, meaning each class is exactly present in 25% of the documents. If you have such a distribution, you can just use accuracy. That's the simplest metric you can use to evaluate classification tasks. And in well-balanced classes, it's not a problem to use that. As soon as you have imbalance here, meaning some of the bars are small or very small compared to the others, right? Only relative numbers count, of course. Then you would have what you call an imbalanced data set. And then it's important that you look at other metrics, so which I'm going to show to you next. Right, and then let's execute the next 2 cells, which will give you 2 other visualizations. So first of all, what's called a confusion matrix. From these confusion matrix, you can easily see, right, that from the 40 documents that we sent to the model, we got all purchase orders that we sent. Let's maybe first explain this table for people that are not familiar with the confusion matrix. So give me 1 minute. We have a true label, right? So true label would mean that's what I decided what the document is when I generated the document, right? We can say we have some document where we know it's a purchase order, some document where we know it's a payment advice, and so on. And we have a predicted label. That's what we call the label that's returned by the service. So what has the model learned, right? Of course, the service wasn't trained on these models. That's something that, of course, is a very important thing to remember. You should always, of course, keep your training and test sets separate and so on, right? So what you can see here is that on these documents, for 10 out of 10 purchase orders, a purchase order was classified as a purchase order by the model. Payment advice, the same thing. The one document type where the model was trained or where it doesn't work to 100%, actually to just 80% of documents are correct, is for invoice. It classifies 2 as purchase orders, right? So yeah, and you can also see that for the other category, all documents were classified wrongly. And this is simply because the other category was not, the model was not trained on the other category. So we assume we have some, whatever other documents in our stream of documents that we want to analyze. And now we would also have to train the model to basically detect when the document is out of scope of the model. So what we would need to do is retrain this model with some documents that are not of the 3, and then we would have them here. right? So then we would have this diagonal, which would be the ideal form of a confusion matrix, having it all on the diagonal. In this case, you could say the accuracy would be something like 28 divided by 40, right? So it's not very good because we mix in this one category. If we ignore that category that the model wasn't trained on, which is something you should never do, basically have what violates the assumption of IID. So machine learning in general has the assumption that your training set and your test set are IID, meaning they are independent and identically distributed, right? And important here is the identical. So you shouldn't pull from two different distributions for training and test. That's very well known. It's called training serving skew. That's what's basically shown here. So we have used 10 documents that are from another class and we'll just put them in any class. If it wasn't trained on that, what you should now do is incorporate that. And this should, of course, also be an as representative sample as possible. With that said, here's a precision recall curves. I won't go into details. This is now basically another metrics. You can also then of that get the F1 score. So that's, let's say, the next metric you would use after accuracy if you have imbalanced classes. It corrects basically accuracy. You can imagine if you only have a class frequency of 1%, you can always get 99% accuracy, right? And that's of course not what we want to, it's not very informative, let's say, an imbalanced classes accuracy. So we would use these confusion matrices or precision recall curves to visualize precision and recall, which are basically visualization of false positive and false negatives classifications. That's about it about the PR curves. I think for that, to understand them in detail, we would need longer probably. I'm briefly going to mention some of the exercises that you can do on yourself, right? If you are interested, of course, only. But that's interesting. So you could, for example, try to find out which are these two documents that are misclassified, right? That would be a simple enough task. You could also try to show them like we did before. What you could also try to do, and that's basically now this part 4 that we always mark as optional. So it's something that you can do at your convenience if you're interested, or you can also say, yeah, I've seen enough of this service. I understand what it does, or I'm not interested because I understand what it does, right? That's also always an option. So point 4 would basically be showing how you could use potentially the confidence values to sort out documents that are from another class. As we already discussed, maybe why it's not the best idea to do that, right? So that's also why you have some question here that should point you in the right direction. And in general, if you want to follow up on all of this, right, we have a pretty extensive SAP Help Portal. So you just click this one. This is just the links that I shared with you today during the meeting. So it's also here in case you want to re-click it. And then in the end, we have some developer tutorials on developers.sap.com. I think it's that is the domain. And developers.sap.com, we have basically tutorials similar to the first one we did as prerequisites, but also for training your own model. As I said, only thing for training your own model, you will need an enterprise instance, meaning you can't use a trial account instance, because then you will get this 429 feature is not supported in trial mode. Yeah, and that's about it. So we have finished with the first part. So with the part about the AI bus service document classification. I hope you managed to find something useful here, at least understand whether the service is something that you're interested in or not. And with that, I would hand over to Serdar, who is now switching on his camera, very good, and who has a big SAP building in the background, so that's also always good, right? So much more interesting than a tent with a light. Yeah, I want to thank you all for coming with us through this session. I will now be answering questions in the chat in case you have any, and Serdar will take over the audio channels. To you, Serdar.
Thanks a lot, Manuel. Much appreciated. As Manuel also mentioned at the beginning as well, this part now is going to be about another AI business service, which is called document information extraction. So I'll simply go ahead and start by sharing my screen.
I'll stop sharing, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So hopefully you can see it. Is it visible, Manuel?
Yes, I can see it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So just to give like the information, like just recap on the information that Manuel has already given basically. So what we do with document information extraction is, simply put, is we extract business relevant entities from some supported document types. Supported business document types currently means invoices and payment advices. For a limited number of customers, we are also doing purchase orders, but this is not like open to all the customers yet. So basically what we have in these invoices and payment advices is an unstructured data. And we basically try to extract the header field information and line item information from these documents in an automatic way. You will see that there are two ways to consume the document information extraction service. The first thing that I will show after the initial setup, of course, is through using our UI, our own UI. Another way that I will show afterwards will be using our REST API, which is basically currently the biggest portion of our users are using the REST API apart from UI. So, but I will come to the details about like the numbers and how it's done later. So I will, this is actually the same, so to say, place that's the same URL that Manuel shared. Is basically under the document information extraction section, but I'll still paste it. How do we see like the general screen, Manuel? Right now it's just showing me the video section for seeing the text. Oh, okay, now I found it. There we go. I'll just share it just in case. So also the way that Manuel did is going to be similar over here. We have a set of exercises that that I'm going to follow to a certain point, but we won't be able to cover like everything, especially enrichment of the and master data enrichment part that is at the end. So basically you can try to follow me, and I'll be following the document as well, but also it's going to be hands-on. So at any point, if there is any questions, the same with the presentation of Manuel, feel free to ask and stop. I will be waiting in between for like the steps as well, for you to do the steps yourself as well. So first things first, in this document, as you can see, the first thing is the setting up the service itself. So in exercise 1, we have a link over here for this. The first part of that tutorial you have already done. Basically, you enter your trial account. So let's do that together. Again, I click enter your trial account. Once you do that, you will see on the left a section called boosters. So by using boosters, we will be basically setting up the service automatically, and the service key will be automatically generated for you. And we will also have the links for the UI application through it as well at the end as an end result. So over here, once you click boosters, you will see a tile, hopefully, that says set up account for document information extraction over here. Once you click on it, the only thing that you need to do is click start, and then basically I have done it before, so I'm not doing it like again. You'll click start, and then basically it'll take a short amount of time to set the system up. Once it is done, there'll be a pop-up. Please don't close that pop-up right away, because it has contained some information that you'll use later on. At this point, I will wait for a few minutes for you to use the booster. And if you can let me know kindly whether it works or not for you, that'd be great. if you can kindly let me know through chat, like if you are done and you see this like success pop up, or like if there's a problem, just like kind of let us know. Thanks, Jonas.
Sarah, just one comment, because I saw 2 Slack notifications popping up in the top right. What you can do is you can say do not disturb in this notification at the very top right of your Mac, or just
thanks. I'll directly kill it.
Very good.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, I'm not hearing any complaints from anyone. So for the sake of time, I will continue. Over here, once you have the pop-up, make sure that you download the service key. As in the pop-up, there's going to be like this sign, so download it, please. If you already, like by mistake, close the pop-up, don't worry, I'll show another way to like access this key later on, of course. So have basically download it. And also, you can also in a new tab, open our UI application as well, by clicking the second link, which says go to application. Basically, once you do this, then we are done with this step. The second thing to do is basically we are going to look at our UI to basically look at the functionalities that document information extraction provides. For this, we have a set of data that we will work on, and you can find this set of data under exercise 2. So you just like click and you basically download it. And after you download it, please make sure you unzip it. Once you do that, basically, then we can open the app. So by the link that was provided in that pop-up, if you have by mistake turned off that pop-up, that's fine. What you can do also is to go to your trial account and you go to your trial account. You can go to instances and subscriptions. And basically, you should see under application, document information extraction trial UI, and you can go to the application through that icon over there as well. As a second way. I already downloaded the documents that we are going to work on. The ones that we are going to work on, the ones that are...
Let me briefly interrupt you. There was a question about entitlements. Is that anything you have ever experienced? I already answered the question, but
I haven't experienced it. Was it during like the booster setup, like it asked for something like that?
I'm assuming that's the case, yeah. So whatever, when it's asking, so if you followed the flow that we did, it shouldn't ask for entitlements in any way. What can happen if you basically reused, let's say, your enterprise account, and that's like with all enterprise accounts that you might have. An enterprise account, you don't simply have unlimited quota for all services, as of course they also can create costs. So what you would need to do if you asked for entitlement in that case, so if you use an enterprise account, don't exactly follow the workshop outlined here, right? Then what you should do if it's asking for entitlements, you should go to SAP Control Center, I think it's called. So it's basically an administrator interface, let's say, for these kinds of global accounts in SAP Business Technology Platform. And what you can do in this control center is you can configure which entitlements you have, and then you might need to configure which sub account or space they are given to. So this is like an additional feature of the Business Technology Platform. I would hope that if you use the trial account, it shouldn't happen for you. If you use an enterprise account, you briefly need to go to the control center and give you these entitlements. Sorry for interrupting, Sarah.
No, on the contrary. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the explanation. I hope that clarifies it. If not, feel free to ask a follow-up question as well. When we go back to go to the data that we are going to work on, so like we already unzipped it hopefully, and over there the things that we are going to work on are some invoice documents that are in PDF format under the invoice folder. So you can either basically drag and drop the documents over here, or you can also use the plus icon over here and then pick the ones that you would like to add, which is basically it comes down to the same thing. In my case, as I said, I've already uploaded them, so I'll wait maybe 30 seconds or so. As usual, if there's anything missing, let me know so that I can help, or Manuel can help. Okay. The one thing that I forgot to mention is that by default, the document type over here, what you see is like invoice. And in our case, this is okay because they were all invoices anyway. But the other option that I mentioned as well that that you can work on is payment advices. In the exercises, in the exercises page that we are following, there are also some extra basically exercises for payment advices as well. But for the sake of time, we are not gonna go to that during this session. So now we come.
Sarah, I need to interrupt again. So there's one more question, and it's one person saying, "Hello, I got a little lost. How do I upload documents to BDP?" So what I'm assuming is maybe you could show again how you upload the document.
Okay, how I upload the documents. Okay, so so the first thing is that you need to be able to open the UI of like document information extraction. As I said, if you like have it already, if you don't have it already open, you need to go to your trial. Instances and subscriptions. And over here in the application, document information extraction trial UI, there's a go to application thing, icon, which takes you to our UI. And from there, what you need to do is to click this plus icon. And then you can either drag and drop the documents or like add them. And the documents themselves are mentioned in the exercise documentation under exercise 2 here in the data zip folder. So you just like will need to download it, extract it, and basically use the PDFs under the invoice folder under it. Does that answer the question? Okay, thanks a lot. Once you have that, then what we are going to do is just like an example to basically see the some of the capabilities of document information extraction. Let's, for example, go to the fake document over here for Twitter, and you see that there's some boxes that are already created. The ones that are in blue are basically for headers, for header item, for header fields, and the ones that you see in oranges are what we call line item fields. So what we do is that now we are going to see the details of this. We are going to click over here the button that says extraction results. By clicking this, we are able to check the confidence values of the extraction and see if what has been done correctly, if there's anything like to fix manually, basically, if it is needed. And once it is done, once we're satisfied with it, like we are gonna confirm the document as well. So this is something, for example, a new thing that is being added to extract the supplier name from the logo. But in this case, for example, you see that this has been done wrong. So what we are going to do is the following. We are going to click the edit button over here. It also gives you a confidence rate over here, what it thinks. And over here, we're going to change it to Twitter. We can also look at the other ones to see if they make sense. when we hover over the bounding boxes, we see which header field or line item field it is talking about. Or as another option, we can also click on the text boxes over here, and it automatically takes us to where this field is, and also highlights it. For example, I click buyer address, it took me over here. I'll wait a few seconds so that you're able to hopefully follow along. Okay, so basically we corrected basically a field. It might be the case that also in this unstructured document, we might have missed some of the information that is not extracted currently. In our case, for example, in this example document, the payment term field is empty, but according to us, the due date information is a payment term. So you simply create a bounding box around this, which opens a pop-up and extracts the value that you see over here. You simply say what this value corresponds to. So you can say, in our case, it's a payment term, it's a payment terms field. Then you click apply, and voila. So you see it over here that is extracted. And now it says confidence is 100 because this is something that you've done yourself. So it basically gives a 100% confidence score over there. The same thing applies, of course, line items as well that you see over here. We have 3 lines over here, and you see like the description, the amount, and so on and so forth. You can also do the same operations over there too. Once you go through these and you say that, okay, this looks good to me, then what you need to do is to confirm the document, say that this is all good. And it basically opens a pop-up, says that, are you sure that you are confirming? Once you have confirmed it, you're not able to change your values. And you can say confirm. Then basically the status goes from ready to confirmed. I realized, though, I'm very sorry. I realized since I loaded this up front, I skipped a step. So if you've been following, you might have been confused that when we are adding different documents over here, I forgot to mention there's this step of selecting which header fields that we want to look at, or which line item fields you need to look at. At this point, since I missed it, so I'm sorry for that. Basically, whatever we pick and over here are the ones, whatever line items the header fields we pick are the ones that are being extracted afterwards. So this is an operation that I have done before following the documentation. That's why these are pre-selected. But I apologize for the confusion over there. So hopefully you can at least see like what it looks like from here. As I said, now the document has been confirmed, basically. The other ones are like showing as ready, but they haven't been confirmed. That's why we see the statuses like that. Are there any questions at this point?
I didn't see any, so I think
okay,
if nobody speaks up, we are good to go.
Okay. In that case, this takes us, this basically makes us finish exercise 3. Now we come to the next way of consuming document information extraction service, which is via our REST API. And as I said, currently the main chunk of consumers are connected to us through the REST API, and the and currently the biggest is basically other SAP products, mainly the biggest one being Concur invoice service, which has about a bit more than like 2 million documents per month of usage from the Concur side. And they are using, basically consuming it, as I said, they connected, they use in their service our REST API by connecting to a REST API. So now we are going to see how we can do this. In exercise 4, we have a link for creating the auth access token that Manuel was also talking about in his section. So let's quickly, under exercise 4, again, go to that link. So when you were using the booster, it's basically in the pop-up, as I told you earlier, there is a way to basically download the service key. If you have done so, please open that. Again, if you have mistakenly closed that pop-up, again, no problem. When you go to instances and subscriptions in your trial account, you're able to get the service key information from the instances section. And over there, if you go to document information extraction and click the right arrow there, you would be seeing hopefully the service keys section, which has your service key, and you can download it from there too. It's basically the same operation. I'll wait a few seconds in case someone has to follow this method or have any questions. Once you have your service key information, what you need to do, if you follow, or if you also look at the tutorial under exercise 4, that is a link under exercise 4, you need to copy the URL value under the UAA section in a new browser tab, but don't hit enter yet because we are gonna add an extension to it. So you just like add that. And then the extension part is under this tutorial, the Auth token, blah, blah, this section. You just copy that and paste it at the end of the URL that you just copied from your service key documentation and hit enter. This is something that I have done before. That's why I'm directly seeing this. But in your case, you are going to see, if you do it correctly, you are going to see a sign-in pop-up, which asks for a username and a password. The username and password can be found under your service key document. The username would be the value for your client ID inside the quotes, of course. And the client and the password is going to be the value under client secret, again, without the quotes. So username is the client ID. Password is your client secret. Once you add these and click sign in, then you should be able to see something similar to this. So I'll be waiting a minute or two for you to hopefully try it out. Any problems, let us know. Okay. I'm hoping that you were able to put the username and password. If not, at any point, feel free to ask through the chat or like Q&A, of course. Once you have that, as you see in my case as well, you will have your access token, which we will be using in a second. So I can now close this tutorial and get back to our main exercises page. Basically, then what we are going to do is that we are going to consume the REST API through Swagger UI. It is the same way that Manuel has done it for document classification as well. For this, we again go to our the service key documentation, and this time we copy the URL value, not the under the UAA like before, but like on the very top level. There is another URL key over here, and then we need to copy the value of it inside the code and open and paste it in a new tab without clicking enter, because it needs an extension as well. This time it's for Swagger. As for Swagger, you can see the extension at the very bottom of your service key under the key Swagger. You just like copy the value inside the code and paste it at the end of the URL that you pasted a second ago, which takes you to the Swagger UI of document information extraction. Once you, I'll just, before continuing, actually, I'll just like wait for a few minutes, for a few seconds. Manuel, is it okay that we go maybe like 5 minutes more, because I guess it's taking a bit like more time? Is it okay to have, do we have 5 more minutes?
Definitely, yeah. I think take your time, finish. I think we've already answered quite a few questions. So currently there are no open questions. So also you can, of course, attendees start thinking about additional questions if you have any for the Q&A session. Otherwise, it will be very short anyway, the Q&A session. So I don't see any problem with going over time.
Okay, okay, thanks. Is asking the user ID password and again and again. Could you please show the steps to login again? Of course, gladly. So once you are talking about, I'm guessing are you talking about for getting to the access token page?
I'm assuming it's either about maybe try to clarify your question in the sense that did you manage to generate a token?
Yeah, they also just wrote it. Yes, from the access token. Yeah, sure thing. So I can do that. Let's go back to the tutorial. So as it's mentioned over there, what we need to do once we like have this, open this, the username is your client ID. So make sure you don't get the quotes when you're copying it. The username is your client ID without the quotes, and password is the client secret, again without the quotes.
Maybe also because there's two more questions that are related to this. So just to make it very clear again, this step. So you basically open from this UAA the URL that's given here, right? That's this here in the case that Seda is showing. It's called https://7ff trial authentication blah blah blah. Right, a little bit further down where it just says URL under UAA, right? This you copy to your browser, then you to a empty tab, then you append this stuff that Seda is showing, right? And then you copy the two things, client ID and client secret, into the username, the client ID, and the password, the client secret. Then you click OK. And if it's showing it over and over again, it most likely means that either you are having the wrong URL, you're maybe including quotes in your password or something like that, right? So that should be the way to resolve it.
You're right. This has happened before, the wrong URL, as you said. Very good point. So make sure that you use this URL for the auth access token.
I think UAA, I think it stands for something like Unified Authorization and Access, something like that.
Good point. So you can have a look at it and like retry it, and hopefully it fixes it. If not, again, feel free to contact.
Yeah, maybe also we briefly redo this step so that people know how to add here the token, but I think that was pretty clear.
Yeah. So, okay, got it. Thanks. I choose the UAA. Okay, great. Then, as I said, to get to this page, we basically this time pick the URL value on the top level, unlike the access token one. So we pick this one, and then we put the extension, the Swagger extension, at the end of it, and open it in a new tab, which takes us to here. Now it's time to authorize. What you need to do is to be able to use the REST APIs. You need to do authorization. For this, you are going to simply type bearer space. Then you will go to your access token that you just created. You'll copy inside the codes for the access token key, the value. And then if I can find which tab I was, as I said, bearer, empty space, then copy that and click authorize. After which you will see the notification authorized, which is great. And then you just say click close, which means that now hopefully you're able to use our stuff, have access to the API endpoints. Great. I'll wait for a second or two.
Yeah, maybe just one comment also from my side, because I think it was asked earlier. So this is the way I think how you can easiest use the Swagger API that Serdar showed now, right? So you would generate a token using this one endpoint. Token, I think, usually is valid for about 24 hours. So you would have to regenerate that on a daily basis, right? As we said before, service key is confidential normally. Also the token, of course, is confidential, right? Basically, it means people can do things in your account if you share that. That should be very clear. Apart from that, now you have the advantage now, and that's what basically Swagger takes care of, right? Somebody asked, do I need to authorize every time, right? In this case here, Swagger will now keep this token basically in its local browser context. So it's not Swagger, it's your browser, I guess, right? But keeps this form field filled, right? So now we can use all the endpoints, try them out without needing to authorize every time again, right? We'll always reuse this token. Just if you go there tomorrow, you will get an unauthorized thing, which would mean you would need to regenerate your access token.
Correct. Thanks for the clarification. If there are no questions at this point, and if hopefully like you don't have any problems, then I'll continue. If not, please drop a message. Let's see some of the functionalities, just like a small set of it. So if you go to the document section, the document API section, and click the Get Documents Jobs, once you do that, you can click the Try It Out button. After you click that, there's going to be a bar that says Execute. Upon clicking which, it will give you basically the set of documents that you earlier uploaded using our UI over here. So, for example, we looked at the Twitter one, right? So, for example, we can see over here that one of the documents that we have is a Twitter one. The status is confirmed since we basically did that through the UI. When it's uploaded, what the client ID is, and so on and so forth. The other ones that we uploaded are also over there. So their status is done since we haven't basically we haven't done any confirmation on them. You are able to see these. Of course, you can also, if you have specific client, you have like different clients, you can also filter the search to like a given client ID as well, the one that you are seeing over here. it's part of this. Once you do this, for the Twitter one, please copy the ID inside the codes. What we are going to do now is that we are going to look into detail what basically the specific one for like Twitter entails when it comes to header fields and line items. Basically, we are going to see the same information, pretty much the same information that we saw through the UI. So for this, what you are going to do is that you can collapse this for keeping it a bit more cleaner. Then go this time, rather than get document jobs, we go to get document jobs ID, where we can give a specific ID over here. And as usual, click, once you expand it, click try it out and put the ID that we just copied for Twitter. Once you do that, you will basically see the same information, the set of like header fields that have been extracted, their categories, the confidence level, their coordinates, the coordinates of the bounding boxes like that you saw in the pages. Apart from the header fields, as I said, you're going to also see the bunch of like line items that have been extracted as well, and the related confidence and other type of informations. So it basically is the same. At this point, basically this covers section, the exercise 5. And this is basically in terms of what I'm going to cover demo-wise. This is the end of it. But you can also continue looking at the exercises later on. One key functionality that we haven't covered, for example, here is in exercise 6. That's also what I'm currently showing, which is uploading supplier data for matching, which is what we call as master data. This means, for example, if you have already a master data for the business entities that you have, or like the employees that you have, you can upload this data to our system, and basically then this would be used to for like this would lead to better extraction results. For example, in the case of like Twitter, for like the name matching, if you have like a data like a business entity like for Twitter, then it would basically more likely extracted information that was extracted incorrectly without using master data in a correct way, because there would be some comparison with the master data that we already have in the background to what we think what we have. So that would, the correction would be made according to the master data which you provide. And this functionality is also heavily used by customers as well. But for the sake of time, as I said, I won't be going into it. As also mentioned over here, and what I partially mentioned before, the REST API is used mostly by services by other SAP product services, like the main one, as I said, Concur. Some of the other ones are S4 Payment Advice Management and also IRPA. So that brings us to the end of the document information extraction demo. So if there's any questions specifically to like what we have gone through, or is there any general information encapsulating document classification as well, I think now it's a good time to have a Q&A. Right, Manuel?
Exactly, yeah. So I think we have another 18 minutes officially. So I think we have tried to answer and succeeded, hopefully, in answering your questions that you had during the session. So if you have any questions, also more open or conceptual, now would be the time to ask. Also, of course, feedback is always welcome, right? You can either raise your hand, then we will unmute you, then you can use the audio channel to give feedback or ask your question. You can put it into the Q&A tool or the chat. Questions, feedback, comments, anything is very welcome. And if we don't have it, I think we can give you back almost 15 minutes of your valuable time, and that's also sometimes a good idea.
For the PowerPoint, did you say that you're gonna share it, or I forgot?
I will find out. I will talk. So I think I would have to talk to the organizer of this webinar series, right? I'm not usually. I mean, as far as I know, this is not only, this is also external people here. So I guess that I think that the organizer of this webinar series mentioned that they would share it with everybody, right?
Okay.
So I would assume that it will be made available on the webpage of this webinar series, but I can't tell you for sure. Otherwise, maybe what I will do is I'll just write my email in the chat, and you can write me or us. Maybe we write both of our emails in the chat, so that in case you have questions, feedback, or want to have the presentation and don't find it on the webinar page in the next days, then just drop us a line. I mean, I'm definitely happy to share these slides with you. But I would also assume that they will become available on the webinar series page. The recording will definitely be available, right? So the session is recorded, as I stated initially. This recording will also be available. Yeah, about the slides, I didn't make sure beforehand. I'm sorry about that. So I can't tell you.
That's okay. I guess one question that I saw, you spoke about IRPA, how IRPA would be integrated into document extraction classification, at least from the document information extraction. I would like to share my screen again. Desktop 1. We have general gem page. Manuel, do you know if this is accessible outside SAP as well? The general landing page?
I think it should.
Gem pages, hopefully. If not, like also let us know when we like give the emails. I'm going to basically put it in chat over here. This is basically a place which has general information for document information extraction, and under which has good explanation about IRPA 1.0 and IRPA 2.0 integration. So for the sake of
maybe also share the blog post
clarity.
of the
I'll just like directly I'll also I guess like this one is fine. So I just like looked over added over here. You can have more information about hopefully the IRPA integration from these documents. If not, please feel free to contact us further, and I will also type meanwhile my SAP email like Manuel did.
So I think like one attendee also mentions that probably the SAP GEM site is not accessible to external people. So that's also good information.
Good information. So how about the blog post that
the blog post will, that almost certainly will be accessible, I think.
Okay,
you can try it out.
Then, okay, then it's good that I put it over there. Was there someone?
I think you missed an I in your email address, right? It's your last name. Looks different.
You know my email address better than mine. Yes. I just did it so that no one can ask me stuff. Okay, but you unfoiled it, so now you
that
have
was
the right
not successful. Yeah, need to hide it better next time. Okay.
Next time. You can give access to SAP GEM by adding our email IDs. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Then
so if you're interested in that,
just
if you're interested in that, drop us a line.
Yeah. Was there someone raising a hand that we missed? I feel like we did, or there is still up.
One. Yeah. I will unmute you.
Talk.
So
yeah.
You should now be able to talk.
Hi,
Hello.
my name is Prashant. I just joined with another Teams ID, so I'm sorry for that. Actually, you just mentioned about SAP Concur 2 assignment of Concur with AI Business Services. So is it the same, just like IRPA, that needs to be configured to get access?
So I think this is, you said, go ahead.
No, sorry. Were you going to say something?
I would just try to answer. So I think this is two different integration. So there's different integration on different levels with docs and DC products from different services, right? So maybe to first finish the IRPA story, I will also post a link in the chat, and that will tell you about one IRPA integration, for example, that we did for a customer. So one success story that we had where we basically help one customer to use IRPA or used IRPA to consume our service and integrate it with other services. It's usually one case, right? And IRPA, of course, is something, robotic process automation, where you do stuff that's not part of standard software, you would call it, right? Concur is a classical standard solution. So you have a solution where you already have everything integrated, right? So it's just integrated into Concur. And even without you configuring Concur in any way, you would in certain situation use our service, right? But that's completely how would you say, transparent to you, right? You don't need to know about this. So the functionality is provided end to end, right? So Concur makes sure that they integrate with this API that Serda showed to basically consume this functionality, and would just basically display the results and so on via their UIs, their services, and so on. Right, so these are, I think, the two different ways to integrate. IRPA is usually used for something where you want to do that's not done often enough, or maybe a little bit custom to your use case to basically fill the gaps between different standard solutions that we have. That's where I would see the difference between IRPA and Concur.
Manuel, I got your point because it's cloud to cloud integration. But if it is like, for example, it's like IBP, integrated business planning, and other clouds provided by SAP. So where are the AI business services are being there? So will it be directly activated through CPA? I mean, like I don't have any information like how it works. So can you please give me little knowledge on connecting to any other clouds?
Yes, of course. So you can, in principle, consume our service from via multiple different what we call commercialization strategies, and you can also consume our service via multiple data centers. So currently, it depends a bit on the service. Document information extraction, for example, I think is currently deployed in a data center in EU10. That's like an ID, an SAP-wide ID. Should be known to you if you work a lot with that. In EU11, that's a certain mode that is basically for European only access mode, but it's also deployed in JP10, in US10.
US10.
Yeah. Yeah. So lots of data centers around the world. There's more coming, of course. It always depends on how much requests we get and so on, so that you can choose the data center nearer to you, right? So you don't have to send it through once around the globe, because it will increase latency and so on. That's first the data center question. And then maybe in terms of commercialization, I think both products are available via CPA. So that's a Cloud Platforms Enterprise Agreement. This is a little bit, let's say, bigger overhead, but it's also easier than to incorporate all the services that you might want to have. If you just want to consume a single service from another, you could call it cloud, but in basically any other entity that's around the internet, right? Somehow can reach this publicly available URLs that are our APIs. You can also use the SAP Store. Right, so that's another one where you can very easily buy smaller packets. So CPA, I think, is a little bit bigger. SAP Store is lowest overhead than CPA. And then in the end, you can also, of course, always contact our product management services, and they can also talk to you about, for example, if you are an SAP internal stakeholder, like I think if you say integrated business planning, right, is I think SAP internal stakeholder, they could also talk to you about data centers and would help and enable you, of course. Right. So this is definitely an option. If that's something where you think you need more information, let us know. Right. So CPA, SAP Store, or if you need, let's say, a little bit more guided approach, then we can put you in contact with our program management.
Yeah, I mean, I've saw a video in YouTube regarding like using IRPA for payment advice with AI Business Services. So I just I had a good idea on that, but I just wanted to learn more. So that's the reason I just asked a few more questions on that. So is there any place where we can just read regarding the payment advice, like exercises or something, where we can just go and practice something? Like just like you showed.
So do what you So you would want to use the UI or the REST API or anything in particular you
Yeah,
had in mind?
I mean manual, because trial version doesn't have everything, so we have to use manual interventions. So I just wanted to know like how payment advice are directly used, and against the invoice they just do the payment advice, right? So there was one video on that. So I'll just write a mail to you so that you can just guide me on that. Will it be fine?
Yeah, of course. Of course, please feel free to do this, so to shoot us an email. And regarding payment advices, as I said in the exercises, there's already some extra over there for payment advices as well. But I mean, feel free to shoot an email as well.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for the questions.
And of course, it's true for all of you, right? So if you have more questions or if you want to learn more, we are very happy to help. We have provided our email addresses. You can also just, of course, visit the official product help page. So you will always find ways how to contact customer support, which in the end, if you ask difficult enough question, will reach us, right? We are both part of the development team for these products, but there's also other colleagues, of course, trying to enable and so on the use of our products, right? Which of course we are very interested in. So yeah, we're definitely interested to hear from you in case you're interested to use our product. That's clear in and of itself. Yeah.
No, I'd love to learn more regarding the AI business services. So I'm just practicing IRPA with AI. So I just attended some couple of workshops. So this is the time I just wanted to explore and get expertised in these two segments. And
it sounds like a promising approach.
Yeah, email us.
Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Any other questions? I think we have technically 5 more minutes, right? Let's see, do we have anything in the chat or QA? Any hands up? I don't see any at this point. Manuel, shall we then?
I think let's give it 10 more seconds in case somebody is typing something or something, then just press send now. Otherwise, otherwise you will be booted out, and then we'll give you back at least 4 minutes of your time. And I want to thank you all for participating, right? Thanks, Sarah, for presenting. And
likewise, Manuel, and thanks for all the participation, all the great questions. We are saying it over and over, but yeah, contact us for like any more details if you want to integrate with AI Business Services, the document classification, document information extraction. We are more than happy to help and work together.
Also, thank you for some feedback in the chat. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Session.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you as well. Take care, everyone.
Take care.